Episode 67 of Common Knowledge. Let's take a look at some common cards. See if they're any good in Pauper. Echoing Decay is 1 and a black for an instant. Target creature and all other creatures that share the same name as that creature get -2/-2 until end of turn. Originally from Darksteel, so I like that. But if this said all other creatures with the same creature type, we'd be talking. You could take down some fairy decks with this. You could take down some ninjas on the fairy deck with this. You could just murder some slivers. That would be pretty rad. This could be a really cool card. It's still kind of cool. Like, this takes out all the fairy miscreants. This could take out all the fairy seers. This could take out all of the what's the 2-mana fairy that does the counter thing? That one. Why is the name? I'm forgetting the name. I have the card. I have a fairies deck. I should know that. I'll remember it at some point, I'm sure. This can take out all the plated slivers, I suppose. Maybe not, actually, because the plated slivers would stack on top of each other. Maybe it wouldn't take out the plated slivers. But it could take out a lot of things. And it would be the biggest blowout. Well, it wouldn't. God, now I keep forgetting. Persistent Petitioners is a 1/3, right? It is a 1/3. You're not taking out Persistent Petitioners. Never mind. That would have been the best tech against that. And that's a card that is it does see play in one deck, exactly one deck. But this doesn't even do what you need against that. It's okay. It's an okay kill spell, but we have way better kill spells that do way more. Like you have to really get the magic scenario that your opponent is playing 4 copies of a creature that's 1/1 or 2/2, and they get them all on the board. Like that requires a fair number of hoops to jump through, even for something like a fairies deck that is able to drop a lot of cheap creatures early, able to draw a lot of cards to get those cheap creatures early. It's just not quite good enough. We'll give it a... I was going to give it a 2 something, but I think it's probably more like a... No, I'll give it a 2. I'll just give it a 2. Stonewise Fortifier is 1 and a white for a 2/2 human wizard. You can pay 4 and a white to prevent all damage that will be dealt to this creature by target creature this turn. I'm almost positive we've done this creature before, and it's still pretty bad. I'm just going to skip this one. I'm pretty positive we've seen it before. Tezzeret's Ambition is 3 and double blue for a sorcery. Draw 3 cards. If you control no artifacts, discard a card. 5 mana to draw 3 cards. That's a Lorien Revealed right there. Lorien Revealed can also Island Cycle for 1, and so we play it all the time. This potentially has you discard a card if you control no artifacts, but I imagine you have an artifact. It's very easy to get artifacts, even just little tokens that you're, a clue token, a food token, something like that. So that part doesn't worry me, but if you're a blue deck, you play 4 Lorien Revealeds, and you're only partially playing the Lorien Revealed for the draw 3. Like that's nice if you're late in the game and you just need to refill your hand and you have all the mana for it. But most of the time you're playing those Lorien Revealeds as Island Cyclers, and it's just cool that you can play it later in the game. The draw 3 cards is not the amazing part of Lorien Revealed, and it being broken off into this other card that came out before Lorien Revealed did. I understand that, but this effect on its own is not good enough for Pauper, I would say. I would give this a... honestly, just knowing... It's a little unfair, because what do you... When you're rating cards like this, and this is a very abstract problem, I suppose, but when you're rating cards like this, do you rate it that, hey, this effect is still pretty good, right? So do you rate it just for the effect that it has, or do you rate it for the usefulness in a Pauper deck? Because the effect, draw 3 cards for 5 mana and possibly discard one, but probably keep all three. Draw 3 for 5. I'd say that's, like a 2.5, 2.6, 2.7 kind of ability. Okay. But knowing that Lorien Revealed's in the format, knowing that you'd play 4 of those before you'd play any one of these, and that once you have 4 copies of that, do you really need any more copies that draw 3 cards? And the answer is no, not really. You don't need that many 5 drops in your deck. So essentially, this is a 1. Never play this card. Never touch it. Never think about it ever again. Play 4 Lorien Revealeds. Be on your way. And so how do I rate it? I kind of go back and forth on this a little bit. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. We're like, okay, you give it some points because the ability is something, but also you have to take away some points knowing that it's never going to get played because there's a card that's better than that. The other thing to note is that if you are judging the cards, knowing that there are better cards than this, you have to know every card, and I don't know every card. I don't know every card off the top of my head. Spellstutter Sprite, by the way. I'm sure you were all yelling at Spellstutter Sprite's the name of that, the 2-mana 1/1 fairy that counters something when it comes into play. I know its text is a little different than that, but you know what I mean. You already knew it was Spellstutter Sprite when I said it, and you just were yelling at me. Anyway, it requires you to know every single card in the game to know whether this is the best version of that effect. And that's asking a lot from anybody, even somebody who's an entrenched Magic the Gathering player, even somebody who's looking at Pauper cards all the time, as somebody like I am. It's hard to know every card in the format. There's 10,000 of them. And so this is a long way of saying I'm going to give this better than a 1. And I'm going to give it a 1.6. That's such a long walk to get to, hey, this card's pretty bad, 1.6. And I could have done that in 4 seconds. But I think there is some value in understanding how the scale works, even though I think the numbers in here are generally stupid. Don't really worry about the ratings. Kind of just worry about whether the card's good or bad or useful in decks. That's the part that I really want to impart. So I don't know. That's a look into my brain. Sorry that you had to see it. But 1.6. And we'll move on. 2 Vigorous Charge. It's single green mana for an instant. You can also pay a kicker cost of a single white mana. So pay that additional white as you cast the spell. Target creature gains trample until end of turn. And whenever that creature deals combat damage this turn, if this spell was kicked, you gain life equal to that damage. Huh. That's interesting. Giving something trample for a single green mana, I would say, is not great. I would rather this be a giant growth, That being said, trample's not the worst thing to give something for a single green mana. The white kicker is really good. Because you're going to play this on a big creature, right? You're going to play this on a 5/4 Avenging Hunter. Well, that already has trample. You're going to play this on an 8/8 Ulamog's Crusher. And knowing, it doesn't even say combat damage to a player, which is interesting, because then what's the point of the trample? Okay, go with me on this. I know I just had a big diatribe on the last card, but if this card... Instead, it would be a worse card. I understand this. But if this card instead said, whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, if this spell was kicked, you gain life equal to that damage. That would make a little bit more sense to me from a design aspect standpoint. Okay, I give the creature trample, so I know the damage is going to get over to the opponent, and then I'm gaining life based on that damage. But this is just saying, you have an 8/8, and you give it trample, but you're just going to gain 8 life at that point, regardless of how much damage it does to a creature or the player. It's It's better. It's better than the card I just described, but I feel like my card probably makes more sense in Invasion than this one does. Um, I don't think this is terrible in some kind of Selesnya deck where you're probably sideboarding this, putting this in the sideboard against burn decks, just so you have a way of keeping the life gain up, keeping your life up. Although maybe you don't put it in a sideboard because green and white both have life gain cards that aren't as, you don't have to jump through as many hoops. They're not as conditional. You just, it's a creature enters play and it gains you 4 life. It's Pulse and Marasa gives you 6 life and you find something back from your graveyard. Those are probably better than this. But this is interesting. Not interesting enough to give it a really great score. I'll give it a 1.7. It's better than the last one. No, I'll give it a 1.8. I'll give it a 1.8. It's still just a little bit better, but it's interesting. More interesting than the 5 mana draw 3. Turn to Slag is a 5 mana. We did this one too. We've just done this card. I commented on it. It wasn't very good then. 5 mana for 5 damage is not very good, even when you can destroy equipment. Equipment doesn't happen all that often. So we skipped this one. It's not good. Trenching Steed is 3 and a white for a 2/3 horse rebel. You can sack a land, and this creature gets +0/+3 until end of turn. Interesting. It's funny. It's always funny to see an image of a guy on a horse in a Magic card, because 99% of the time they're talking about the guy, or they're talking about the entity as a single thing. Like, hey, it's a guy on a horse, so it's, blah 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 cavalry. And so you're thinking about, okay, well, it's the guy who's doing the damage, plus it's the horse that's able to make it tougher, maybe, or makes it faster, or gives it horsemanship, or something like that. Like you think about those things as a unit, or it's the guy on the horse, and the guy on the horse is special, so we are thinking about the guy. This is a guy on a horse, but the card's about the horse. Like, the guy doesn't matter. Any guy could have been on this horse, and this horse would still have 2/3 and would still have this ability. I think that's funny. You just don't see that very often. It's a prophecy card. Prophecy cards are generally pretty bad. Prophecy was not a great set, Rhystic Study notwithstanding. And honestly, Rhystic Study withstanding in anything except Commander. Sacking a land to make your creature into a 2/6, it's not great. There's better ways to sack lands. 4 mana for a 2/3, also pretty bad. It is a rebel, which matters a little bit, but not really. And this is not one of the rebels you would tutor up for with your ability to tutor up rebels. Yikes! Yeah, I'm gonna give this a 1. I'm gonna give it a 1. Maybe it needed a rider. Maybe the rider would have made the horse better. Trustworthy Scout is 1 and a white for a 2/2 human scout. And for 1 and a white, you can exile this card from your graveyard. Search your library for a card named Trustworthy Scout, reveal it, and put it in your hand, then shuffle. Kind of interesting. Interesting as, we see other effects that are similar to this. Not exactly the same, but similar. Your Squadron Hawks, which is a 2 mana 1/1 flyer, but it can, once it comes into play, you can go find other copies of Squadron Hawk and put them in your hand. That gets played in Call Gates and some other decks as well that can do some cool stuff with card advantage like that. We see cards that are able to come back from the graveyard. Your Sneaky Snackers obviously is the main one, but there's plenty of other cards that will find their way back from the graveyard to either your hand or excuse me, either your hand or the battlefield. But this one does it a little bit differently. It does exile the creature from your graveyard, so there are effects that care about cards leaving your graveyard or creature cards specifically leaving your graveyard, and this would give you that trigger. It also does give you a shuffle, which is kind of nice. It does, if you know what's on top of your deck, and you don't want it, you've just did a brainstorm or something, and you've put 2 cards back that you don't really want, and now you can exile this guy, search for another. God, sorry about the throat thing. So you brainstorm 2 cards that you don't want on top. You pay this ability. You go tutor up another copy of this guy to put it in your hand, and then you get a free shuffle out of the deal. Well, a 2-mana shuffle still, but it's not terrible. I think there's just cards kind of on either side of this with the other scenarios that I mentioned, or the other abilities that I mentioned, that probably work just a little bit better in each case. But it's still not bad. It's still not bad. I do this all the time, but it's another grizzly bear. It's a 2-mana 2/2. Those are just grizzly bears to me. They always will be. I don't know. Interesting way. I mean, it deck thins in a way. The next one that you play will deck thin again. It's I'll give it a 2.3, I think. Next is Blazethorn Scarecrow for 5 colorless mana. It's a 3/3 artifact creature Scarecrow, and this creature has haste as long as you control a red creature. This creature has Wither as long as you control a green creature. Those are interesting abilities. Wither, by the way, it says it deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. So it's a little bit like Infect in that way, except it doesn't give poison counters to the opponent. So it still does damage to opponents, but it does give -1/-1 counters to creatures. It's cool. A 5-mana at its absolute best. This is a 5-mana 3/3 haste Wither. And you have to have both a red creature and a green creature on the field, or a red-green creature on the field. And it can't be Writhing Chrysalis, because that card has Devoid. So even though it is a Gruul creature to cast, it has no color. So that one doesn't count. That is easily the best Gruul colored creature. Well, again, it's not those colors. Gruul cost creature to play in Pauper. The biggest problem is that the deck it would go into, that kind of Gruul monsters pile, has better cards to play. They're ramping up, and then they're playing their Writhing Chrysalis. They're playing, your Generous Sense or your Oliphants. They're playing just cards that your Annoyed Altosaurs. They've got options that do just fine, and a 3/3 haste Wither is not amazing. And I don't think this card is good enough if it only had one of these effects. If you're playing this in a green deck and you only get the Wither part, or if you're playing this in a red deck and you only get the haste part, I don't think it's good enough for either of those. So it's kind of just a creature without a real home. And for that, we'll give it a 2.1. Next up is Elvish Doomsayer, not Doomslayer. Doomsayer is 1 and a black for a 1/1 elf shaman. When this creature dies, each opponent discards a card. It's each opponent, so you're thinking this is probably more Commander. I mean, it came out in Commander Legends, so you're definitely thinking more Commander, but we've seen a number of cards that do this better for the Pauper format, and those would be the ones that on entering the battlefield, it makes an opponent discard a card. And that's fine, because you only have the one opponent. So your Virus Beetles, your Corrupt Court Officials, plenty of cards that do this thing, but better. Your Skullcap Snail, one of the better ones of those, because it exiles the card from their hand instead of forcing to discard. Those are better. Those are 3 way better options on this. The only thing that makes this possibly better is that it's an elf, but it's in black, so the elves decks don't want to play it, and they wouldn't play it anyway. They have so many other elves. We'll give this a 1.2. It's really, really pretty bad for Pauper. Kenra Scrapper is 2 and a red for a 2/3 Jackal Warrior. It's got Menace. You can exert this creature as it attacks. When you do, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So an exerted creature won't untap during your next untap step. It's interesting. You're kind of so it's a 2-power creature anyway. So you're doubling up its power for one turn and then not getting to use it the next turn. So it evens out. Like it averages out on the amount of damage that it does. But being able to do 4 damage in one turn is better because you can potentially trade with more stuff. This has menace, so maybe it gets in when your opponent has 0 or even just 1 creature out. Maybe on the next turn when this thing is exerted and isn't untapping, your opponent puts a second creature out, and so you wouldn't get the option to do 2 damage the next turn. So you want to take advantage of that. Also, you get to do the damage early. You're kind of doing it on credit. And maybe you just kill the opponent before the next turn comes up where this thing's unable to untap. So it's got usefulness, but 3 mana for a 2/3, not amazing. The menace is okay. You don't want to load this thing up with equipment or anything like that because then it makes even less sense to exert because then you'd be getting more damage each turn. And the +2 doesn't matter as much. It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's gets less good as it continues to go up. You know what I'm talking about. God, I can't think, can barely breathe, but we're getting through it. I'll give this guy a 1.4. I'll give it a 1.5. I'll give it a 1.5. Next up, last official card of the day is Skybox Fairy. It's 5 mana for diminishing returns. Jesus, why can I not remember phrases? Easy phrases. Skybox Fairy is 5 mana for a 4/4 artifact vehicle that flies, and it crews for 2. So you can tap any number of creatures you control with power 2 or more, and this vehicle becomes an artifact creature until the end of turn. That's what vehicles do. It also cycles for 2, which is kind of nice. Kind of nice to just have cycling on a thing as an option. Like, hey, this isn't really the time for this card in this match that I'm in. 2 mana, cycle it away, draw a card. Maybe that card's better. So that's all right, but it's a little bit boring otherwise. It's a Mirror Enforcer that flies that ends up costing probably a lot more than a Mirror Enforcer does. It just doesn't really have a home. And it's these cards I feel the worst about because it's not excessively bad. Yeah, it's a 5 mana 4/4 flyer. Okay, I see the usefulness of that. You kind of have in Pauper especially because you're dealing with all the commons of Magic. I suppose other formats you're also dealing with all the commons in your format at least, but you get this glut of, hey, this is a card that's okay in limited. Like it's you kind of have your 3 tiers. You have your tier of this is trash in every format. It's not even good in limited. You should avoid that card in that format, which means you really should avoid it in every format unless it has like some incredible niche for a very specific kind of deck that, the limited environment that it's in isn't even dealing with that anymore. You have those cards mostly. And then you have this kind of middle tier that I think this card would fit in, which is fine enough limited card. You find a place for it in your deck when you're making 40-card decks. Is it going to be the best card in your deck then? Absolutely not. It's not the worst card in your deck though. It's okay. It's fine. And when you're in Pauper, those cards are like, I don't know, I see the value, but there's just better cards than this. And you can't, so you don't immediately write it off, but you do very quickly know that, it's fine. Fine. Just not very good, not very bad. It's just fine. And then you have your Pauper All-Stars that we're looking for. We're always looking for those gems. And these, I think, are the hardest to rate because they're okay, but they're not great. So I don't want to give them a good score. They're never going to show up in a Pauper deck, but I don't want to give them a bad score. They're not completely terrible cards either. And I think that's kind of where I end up putting a lot of twos. So we'll give this a 2 and know that it's not very good. And we will do our bonus card and we'll hope that it's better, and it's not really. Cavalry Pegasus is 1 and a white for a 1/1 creature Pegasus, and it's got flying. When this creature attacks, each attacking human gains flying until end of turn. It's nice that it's each attacking human. Are they all are they all on the back of this Pegasus? But it's a 2-mana 1/1 flyer. And you have to be playing humans otherwise. I think we just have better decks. We have better cards for better decks. This doesn't really go in a heck of a lot. And it shouldn't. And it shouldn't. We'll give it a 1.6. Call it a day right there. Thanks for watching. See ya.